Welcome back to The Hero Informer. I am AJ, and a couple very interesting things happen here. First of all, maybe Torment isn't Cletus Cassidy and someone completely new, as he finally gets character development and is actually kind of interesting. Secondly, Spider-Man is, fighting for his life against the new monstrous Carnage / Torment hybrid. And even worse than that, it seems like Aunt May is next on the chopping block, with us immediately jumping into the action, picking up where we left off with Spider-Man just trying to dodge and not be impaled by this new powerful creature. He goes on to say and make note that this is what Carnage wanted all along. All of this mess, this entire situation, all of the death and pain, Paul's most recent murder. It was all just a play to get to this moment where he can bond with Torment himself. Peter even blaming Eddie a little bit for this, saying, "You make it real hard for a guy to like you, because in what universe did you think you could control something like this, something like Carnage?" And even with Torment becoming Carnage now, we see a little bit underneath the alien goop and their connection person to person. Carnage directly seeing the man underneath, saying and telling him that, "I'm a fan of your work, Torment, but I just want a glimpse of the man behind the massacres." With him seeing his childhood, his upbringing, him being obsessed and almost haunted by spirals in everything he does or sees. It's almost like it's a voice whispering to him, compelling him to take out these spirals and to kill. So that's mainly the reason why I said this is pretty much confirmed to not be Cletus Cassidy, something that I was theorizing and a bunch of other people were as well. But it seems like he's not, and someone completely new, which again just takes into a whole other interesting area. Regardless, in the moment, in the fight, as Spider-Man is trying to just, not get murdered, he is terrified, with even Carnage picking up on this. And when Torment asks, how does he even know? Carnage goes on to pick out a note that Spider-Man is being very quiet. If you think Carnage speaks too much, you should see Peter or Spider-Man on a good day. Except here, he is almost completely silent, focused, and locked in. But not that it will do too much of anything, because, Carnage is just so much above Spider-Man's weight class where it's not really an effective method of prolonging this encounter. As even he goes on to say, as he is just knocked back and splitting a car in two, he says that Carnage is half right. He might be a little terrified, sure, but the main reason he stopped talking was to think, because Carnage is nearly indestructible and Torment is tactical driven, ruthless. So putting those two together is a very deadly sort of combination, in which as Spider-Man gets back into the battle, he changes up his strategy. If he cannot beat them physically, he's going to attack them verbally, attack their egos, anything he can do to buy a little bit more time to keep someone else from dying. Because yes, much like Paul in the last issue, here this time it's Eddie Brock, who after losing the Carnage symbiote, one of the only things keeping him alive is, dying because he lost it. Whereas underground inside of the sewers, Dylan and Venom are trying to get back and join the rest of the battle and event upstairs. But even then, Dylan goes on to ask Venom, once they get back up there and back into the fight, is Venom going to finally kill Torment for what he did to Paul? With Venom, or maybe Mary Jane inside of Venom, saying, "No, we don't do that." And then Dylan bringing up the fact that they used to kill, and very much so at that. More so Venom than Mary Jane. And this is going to become a reoccurring theme throughout this issue. The heroes and villains fighting and maybe changing their minds on whether they need to kill or not. Even more than that, eventually Venom goes on to break the news to Dylan that not only is his father here and incorporated within his entire thing, but he's bonded to Carnage. But Venom's specific words to Dylan is that, "Eddie, your father is bonded to your brother." Because while, Dylan is the biological son of Eddie Brock, he's also a genetic hybrid of the Venom symbiote, technically. So it also makes him the human brother, quote unquote, to Carnage, who was Venom's first true offspring. Back within Peter's fight, though, his plan has changed from physically overwhelming Carnage to symbiote, which is nearly impossible without any prep or other tools at his disposal, and more into just annoying him and buying time. With Peter going on to think in the middle of fighting some of the ways that he could potentially win this. Can he trigger Shocker's gauntlets and maybe hurt him from the inside out? Is there any fire nearby? How long does Eddie Brock even have without any sort of help or the symbiote to keep him alive? As he continues and even launches forward to knock Carnage's head smooth off of his shoulders, but with the symbiote's regeneration, that is very much futile and even counterproductive, as he gets too close, as the symbiote is now able to grab him, with even Torment being confused because this is his first time fighting Spider-Man in any prolonged sort of sense. He goes on to ask, does this actually work? This childish antagonism. Peter says, yeah, it usually does. But to Torment, it's just noise, and that is something that he is accustomed to dealing with, as we'll get to a little later, as he then continues to just throw and launch Spider-Man into a building nearby. in which this is where Carnage wants to end things, finally kill Spider-Man, split his chest open, and eat his heart. But Torment here, he is under a different set of rules and regulations, as you know, with this entire death spiral sort of event. He says no, soon. The spiral must be honored. Even as Carnage is essentially begging and pleading him that, he's right there, just let's kill him and get it over with. Or even Eddie Brock while he is over there weakened and at his lowest. Though once more, Torment simply says, if you want to work with me, Carnage, then you just have to understand me. Which is kind of a good thing for the heroes because yes, Spider-Man in this situation would more than certainly be doomed and dead if Carnage truly wanted it. But it seems like his saving grace is actually Torment this time, the other serial killer who's going on and causing so much havoc and chaos around New York. Eventually, though, Venom and Dylan finally arrive, only to find that, they're kind of too late and Torment is gone, leaving just a battered and very hurt and bruised Spider-Man and a dying Eddie Brock in his wake. And here they need a plan forward, because for so long they've been on the back burner and playing catch up. Spider-Man tells Venom that they need to get Eddie to a hospital because they're faster and stronger than him, especially in the state he is in now. But Mary Jane or Venom, or even both of them, but mainly Mary Jane as we're going to see, very much has a disdain for Eddie Brock, saying to just put him in an Uber, and if he gets there, he gets there. Because technically this is all of his fault. He bonded with Carnage. He let your secret identity slip into a serial killer. Paul and all those other people dead are all because of him. And even Spider-Man knows this and acknowledges this, saying, honestly, I'm furious and I don't know how I'm going to move on, but I don't want anyone else to die tonight. Because while Venom takes Eddie to the hospital, Spider-Man is supposedly going to go right back after Carnage and Torment. But even as Venom says, that's suicide. But underneath all of the spider powers and abilities and costume, Peter is a genius and picked up on the clues that he technically isn't in any real deadly danger, as even he goes on to say, Carnage is all madness, but Torment is all method. So Torment won't kill him, Spider-Man, until the spiral is complete. Which means he's going to continue his game and go after Aunt May and Aunt Anna, Mary Jane's aunt, next, and Flash Thompson, the current anti-Venom or agent anti-Venom, won't be enough. And speaking of them, we cut over and see Flash Thompson driving Aunt Anna, Mary Jane's aunt, and just overall being their bodyguard, because before the heroes briefed him that a deadly threat as in Torment is coming. But Flash might unwillingly bring them both to their doom as he is driving Aunt Anna to feast just when Aunt May is throwing a family fun night, which we're going to see later that is going to be anything but fun once a certain serial killer gets involved. But back over with Venom, we see him finally get Eddie Brock to a hospital. But Venom here, specifically Mary Jane, isn't doing this out of the kindness of her heart. They are doing this out of necessity. They want nothing to do with Eddie Brock. And even as he sits up and starts to apologize for everything that he has done to Venom over the years, and even to Mary Jane when he was Venom way back when, or at least the villain Venom, he says he doesn't expect forgiveness. Heck, he doesn't even expect mercy. But he just wants them to know that everything that he has done up to this point was an attempt to make things right. He took Carnage so someone else didn't have to. And yeah, he may not have been strong enough to handle him, but Eddie here hopes that at least it counted that he tried. And next time he'll improve and get it right. Though Mary Jane has her own choice words on the situation, saying that her father used to run those same very lines, I'm sorry, I tried my best, I can do better next time. He said those same very lines after he finished abusing and tearing into her mother or her sister or even her. And addicts don't get better by lying to themselves. Continuing saying and telling Eddie, don't die so I don't have to hear Spider-Man mope about it. But we never want to see you again, which is just freaking harsh, dude. Like, Eddie himself knows very well what an abusive father is like. And for Eddie, this is not the most ideal outcome, but, he very did try his best and tried to get this situation under wraps with Carnage. Though you can maybe just chalk it up to Mary Jane, and being in this entire situation is kind of just on edge and ticked off. Someone else who was very much on edge, though, is this new symbiote hybrid between Carnage and Torment. As they are stalking their next victim in the building, Torment goes on to ask Carnage a question, asking him, you would kill everybody in that building if I would let you, wouldn't you? And yeah, obviously Carnage would. He's famished. He hasn't killed or choked the life out of anything for ages. And also he finds the screaming of people he is killing to be funny. Whereas Torment is an entirely different case altogether. Instead of the screaming and chaos, the quiet is all that he desires. Every segment of the spiral that he removes and person he takes out quiets and stills the noises that torments him. Which is why I said that, this almost can't be Cletus Cassidy at this point. He is so far removed, and so ideology is different from anything we have seen of Cletus in the past. Which is honestly the better outcome than just having eventually, the base Carnage be back. It adds for a more interesting twist because yes, these are both villains and serial killers, but they have completely different mindsets and ways of doing it. Carnage eventually saying, just try it his way, and he thinks that Torment would learn to like it. Torment goes on to make clear that yes, it would be very nourishing for Carnage, but every unscreamed plan or unscreamed death would trigger new spirals for him, and Torment would be forced or almost compelled to follow them, making Torment essentially tormented infinitely. Whereas with Peter, as he is swinging off to try to find Torment and Carnage once more, he goes on to think that when he was stranded off in space in the alien wasteland just a little bit ago, during the whole space arc and storyline with Hellgate, he had a broken leg, he was surviving on scraps for weeks, and even that wasn't as scary as this, because that thing made sense. But did it really? Because even he didn't fully know the thing with Hellgate and whatever he was planning. Heck, Hellgate is still supposed to be coming back after him for another confrontation and rematch. But Peter says that all of this killing to satisfy one person's brain and the bloodlust of an alien symbiote is just killing in his name. It's just unfathomable, and Peter just doesn't know how to get ahead of it. Though all he can do and all he ever does is fight and keep going until it stops, and try to ignore the stab of guilt when he realizes and breaks through the building that Torment is currently in and destroying, is that he's relieved that the body in front of Torment here isn't Aunt May, but is someone else, who is supposedly a cousin of Spider-Man's that he didn't really know too well, but is still on the spiral and blood related to Peter. And with Peter swinging and throwing fire at Carnage, it hurts him, yeah, but Carnage at this point is very resistant to fire and sound, unlike any of the other symbiotes within Marvel. And actually, surprisingly enough, it's Torment this time who is getting under Spider-Man's skin with the quips, saying that the spiral is closing tighter, of course with him referring to killing the cousin. Asking Spider-Man, did you grow up together? Were you friends? With Spider-Man getting up close and personal, almost getting ready to twist Carnage's head off and kill him, even though this wouldn't kill the symbiote. Spider-Man says that he is ashamed because right now, in this moment, he can just imagine the sound of his neck snapping, how he wants to kill Torment and by extension Carnage very badly, which kind of brings up the question of, up to this point, why hasn't Spider-Man or anybody else in the Marvel Universe for that matter, taken out Carnage? Because it's not like he's the Joker who's just a normal man. Carnage is like, by his very definition and birth, a almost irredeemable villain and way more powerful than someone like the Joker for Batman. So even though technically he is a life form and Spider-Man doesn't kill people, I feel like Carnage is a very easy exception to make, just referring to the actual symbiote itself and not the human host underneath. But in the moment, because of Spider-Man losing his focus and his train of thought, this is all Torment needs as he uses the Shocker's gauntlet once more to punch Spider-Man, causing a ginormous explosion because inside of the restaurant in the chaos, gas lines were knocked loose and blowing everything up. Though Carnage is fine and escapes on to bigger and better things, whereas with Spider-Man, he has seen better days. His ears are ringing, lungs filling with heat and ash, his body vibrating. He just wants to lay down and go to sleep, give in and lose consciousness, sleep to make this nightmare end. But suddenly, as he opens his eyes, he doesn't care and pushes past the pain because somehow the cousin who was, the target and was supposed to be killed by Torment here, he survives, which I don't get how in this giant explosion. Spider-Man, sure, he has superhuman abilities and he has been in worse situations and worse battles compared to this, but this other random older dude is just, I don't know. Maybe it's the Parker luck actually pulling through this time, which even as this guy says that, Torment did say that they're cousins somehow, Spider-Man throws him off saying, yeah, but don't believe anything a psychopath tells you, as he swings off and tells the guy that he's going to finish this once and for all. Because we see Torment's next target. Yes, it's Aunt May herself, who is currently at feast. And Flash Thompson before was bringing Mary Jane's aunt to the same very location, meaning it's going to be a 2-for-1 special for Torment and Carnage. Which also kind of shows that either Spider-Man has a lot less family alive and it's just Aunt May and his random cousin, or Torment is finally getting desperate. He didn't even kill the first cousin and is already moving on to the bigger and most important target, Aunt May. But that is something that we're going to see unfold next time as this issue and this video comes to a close. As always, this is AJ here at The Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.